Hello everyone, I'm recording this video on the 1st of May 2021, the 225th anniversary of the founding of the Bavarian Illumiates, a secret society which was closed down after a few years, but which has continued to live on in many conspiracy theories. And so I thought it's a good date to think a little bit about what conspiracy myths, conspiracy theories actually are. So what they are is they are narratives. They are stories that try to explain what is going on in the world, which by itself is not yet a problem, but the problem which I personally have with this kind of theory is that they usually try to reduce everything to just very few groups, usually just one or maybe two groups, that are kind of running everything that's going on. And this is not very likely. If you look at what's going on in the world, it's obvious that there's interest groups, there's governments, there's companies, there's religious organizations and many other groups which have interests and try to influence things towards their interests. But if you look at it, you can also see that it doesn't really appear like there's some force in the back running everything. So that doesn't mean that there isn't things like conspiracies, but other than in a lot of the conspiracy myths, those conspiracies usually are quite small. You could, for example, argue that the September 11th attack were a conspiracy by Al-Qaeda, or even more specifically by around 20 people who were able to prepare it, train for it, and carry the whole thing through. Now it becomes much more unlikely if you claim that there is a huge government conspiracy involved, because there's just so many more people who would need to have acted there, and frankly, that's just quite unlikely, that so many people can keep a secret, that so many people can coordinate to make something like this happen. And I think this is like a general problem with most of those theories. It's just extremely unlikely that all the people that would need to be involved actually, well, keep their mouths shut, but even more that they're actually able to coordinate that perfectly to make things look kind of coincidentally and still everything works out. Because it's much harder to make something look coincidentally than to actually plan something and carry it through. So in a way, those stories, I think, are an attempt to make the world a little bit easier, because it's much harder to keep track of a lot of different influences on things than just to say there's one cause, and even if I don't quite understand how exactly it works here, I can just trace everything back to this one cause. It might actually make people feel better, especially if they think they have understood what this cause is, but just from a logical point of view, it's extremely unlikely that this happens, or that this is happening. So what do we do about such conspiracy theories? Are they complete BS, or is there something you can do about them? I think it always depends a little bit on how you go about it. For example, I've actually been interested in conspiracy theories or conspiracy myths for, well, around about 20 years by now. And I actually find them often interesting and somewhat amusing, because I take let's say, a humorous distance to them. So I do not believe them, but I think it's quite interesting what kind of thoughts people come up with about it. And it's also always good not to take everything too serious, and so it can be quite enjoyable. There is another use about it though, and that is actually it's a good way to find things which by now haven't been quite explained. Why is that? Because conspiracy myths usually try to find weak spots, things where there isn't clear explanations, and sometimes they just don't accept explanations that are given. And of course, well, if there's a good explanation, then I would prefer the good explanation. An example for this would be the flat earthers, who say that the Earth isn't a sphere, and there's very good arguments that it's a sphere, so they're just going against established arguments, so this is probably not so helpful. But in other cases, they're actually quite good at finding some holes in the knowledge and try to fill it with some conspiracy. So you can actually look at those theories and see where are the holes in our knowledge. Can we use this to see what areas we need to investigate further? In what areas do we have missing information, have missing knowledge? Can we study this in some way to improve the situation? Or maybe in what areas do we have the information, but actually aren't very effective at transferring this information. So maybe the flat earth theory would be a case of this, where you can say, well, all the information is out there, why this is wrong, but probably it isn't taught as effective as one might wish, and so here's a hole not in the actual theory, but there's a hole in the teaching of the scientific facts. So looking at this kind of conspiracy myths actually could be helpful to help us find how we can improve the descriptions of the world that we have. We have to be careful whenever we interact with such conspiracy theories not to be carried away by their nice narrative. The problem from a philosophical point of view with this kind of theories is that they're usually a closed system. And if you try to use critical thinking and scientific thinking, a big part of this kind of thinking is that there always is a possibility to falsify something. That means you always have the option to prove that something is wrong. Now, there is certain systems of thinking which are closed. So basically, they explain away every argument against them within them, which means that from a philosophical point of view, they don't actually fulfill the requirements for being a scientific theory, and they also don't really fulfill the requirement for being acted upon with critical thinking. Because whenever someone gives an argument against something you think, like, let's take as an example, someone says the Earth is flat, and I go to them and I say, well, there are certain arguments, and I go through the arguments why the Earth actually is spherical, and then they say, yeah, but you're just part of the conspiracy, without actually looking at my arguments, without trying to understand them, and without ever even considering the possibility that they are wrong. So then they're in a closed system. Basically, they're just in a self-fulfilling prophecy, and there's nothing which can change their belief. And so they're basically following an ideology, and maybe they are following it with a religious fervor. And this is not a very good way to actually be able to optimize what we know about the world. Because basically, if we want to increase our knowledge of the world, we have to test. And we have to test to find where we are wrong. Because this is where we can actually improve. If we just always support our opinions by being right, we will never be able to support our opinion. You know, if I try, for example, in everyday life, if I just say you like to go running, And if you just say, oh, I already know perfectly how to run, you will never improve your running technique. To be able to improve your running technique, you have to have the mindset that there is something to improve. So you have to have the mindset that you try to figure out where is it actually not as good as it could be. So where am I doing something wrong? And you can do this in different ways, like you can get a coach, you can try to do it by experimenting yourself, or many other ways, but in the end it's always about seeing where is something not as good as it can be, and that's the only way to improve. The same is true about our understanding in the world. I can only improve my understanding of the world if I'm actually of the mindset that I try to see where my understanding is wrong. And if I find something where my understanding doesn't work as well as another understanding, then to actually adapt it. The problem with conspiracy myths is that they're usually closed systems, so they do not allow exactly this. They do not allow you to improve on your view of the world, because you already have the basics of the worldview, which include that there is no other worldview because it's impossible to disprove it. And more than what those conspiracy myths actually tell, this is a problem from a critical thinking point of view, because you can never improve them. You might feel like, oh, I have the perfect explanation, but, well, it's highly unlikely that there's any perfect explanation anyways, much less likely that you would have found it, and there's probably a lot of arguments against it, but you just close yourself up from any arguments against it, and so you're stuck. And you stick yourself into a mental prison, you do it yourself, and you will be caught. And this isn't even mentioning like some of the terrible things which can be argued for with conspiracy myths. But I will not discuss this here. There have been very dangerous conspiracies, and actually also conspiracies have really harmed people. But this would be another very long video to really go into this. So I'll just try to stick to the philosophical point of view and leave it at that. But what does this mean for us in our lives? Well, this means that we always have to remind ourselves that whatever opinion we hold, however good the arguments for those beliefs seem to be, we always have to be careful not to get stuck in such a closed system, because then we're kind of getting stuck in our own personal conspiracy theory. And well, the antidote is basically what I said before. Just always remember that you might be wrong, and even more, actually look to find where you're wrong, because that is the way that you will improve, by finding out where you're wrong and to look for a better way to do things, a better understanding of things. And always keep in mind that even if I found out one thing was wrong, I now improve my opinion of it, my thoughts on it. Even those new thoughts can also be wrong. Maybe not as wrong as the one I just abolished, but there might be some details in it which are also wrong. To go back to the running example, you might have like a terrible stride, so one which is actually quite unhealthy and is probably bad for your knee or something, and with the help of a coach you get rid of that. That doesn't mean that now you're doing the perfect running, it just means now you're a better runner than you were before. And it might be that then, after a while, you use this, your coach again checks on you and he says, yeah, well, there's still some detail to work out, now your knee is safe, but now we have to change something in the way you step, because it might not be good for your ankle. or maybe it's not even a health question, but it's just something which gives you more speed or more endurance. And after you do that change, then there will be another change and another change and another change. And this is how you get better and better and better. And this is even more the case when you're thinking about mental actions, because our brains are always working, and our brains are always trying to explain things around us. And there's always things that you can improve, but to actually be able to improve it, you have to be very careful not to get stuck in where you are. So keep an open mind. Try to improve your understanding of things. This also means try to improve the methods you use to work on yourself. Science and critical thinking are very good tools for this. And I'll try to give you some more tools of this over time. So thank you for listening. I wish all of you, who are watching it today, a nice May Day, otherwise a nice day and week. If you enjoy this, feel free to like my channel, to share my videos. I'm also very happy about feedback, what you would like to hear more about, what you think can be improved, what you already like about it. So everyone take care. Until next time, goodbye.